Hello everyone, welcome back to this operating system course on the last module, which states about secondary storage structure, and we'll see about the case studies in Linux operating system. I'm Mrs. Archana positioning in the assistant professor in the Department of Information Science, Canara Engineering College. This is an overview about what are the topics which are going to be covered in this module. First, we'll see the overview of mass storage structures, the disk structure, the idea about disk attachment management, scheduling, and swap space management basically. So the main objectives of this particular module is to describe the physical structure of mass storage as well as the tertiary storage devices, and what are the effects on the use of these devices. The second objective is to explain the performance characteristics of the mass storage devices, and we can also include additional operating systems which are provided by mass storage, including RAID. So this can be included as a part of this module explanation as a extended topic. Okay, about the overview of mass storage structure. See, as you know, a storage device is any device which can be used in a computer to store the information, and it will retain this information when the computer will be switched off. We can have various type of storage devices, and these devices varies based on the type of data and the rate at which it is created and used. We have got several examples of storage devices, maybe hard disk or CD-ROM or magnetic tape and removable media. And the computer has got many types of data storage devices, some of them which can be classified as hard disk, compact disk, and magnetic tape or removable media. And drives, as you know, it rotates at 60 to 200 times per second. Those disks provide the bulk of secondary storage, and we have got previously which are nothing but the magnetic tapes, which was an earlier second storage medium. So these disk drives are addressed as large one-dimensional arrays of logical blocks, and this logical block is usually 512 bytes, and although some disks can be low level formatted. The transfer rate is the rate at which it is a rate at which the data flows between the drive and the computer. So this is used as a part of the explanation to the secondary storage device. And we have got what is called as a positioning time. And this positioning time, or the random access time, it is the time to move the disk arm to the desired cylinder. Okay, to move the disk arm to the desired cylinder, we call it as the seek time, and plus the time for the desired sector to rotate under the disk head. So if the desired sector rotates on the disk head, that is called as a rotational latency. So these are the terms which are used in disk scheduling. One is seek time, where it is the time for the disk arm to move the heads to the cylinder containing the desired sector, and rotational latency is the additional time waiting for the disk to rotate the desired sector to the disk head. Rotating the desired sector to the disk head is rotational latency, and seek time is disk moving the disk arm to the desired cylinder. So the sum of seek time and rotational latency is called the random access time. And head crash. There are also possibility of that head crash. So this results because the disk head is making the contact with the disk surface, which has got a bad impact on the disk. So how does this movement of the disk happens? You can observe that there's a spindle, and these disks are attached to the arms assembly. Okay, these discs are attached to the arm assembly, and you can see that there will be a track, and in each track there are several sectors. Okay, in each track there are several sectors, and a disc will consist of all these circular plates which are called platters. So these circular plates are called platters, and each platter has got an upper and lower oxide coated surface. So recording heads, at least one per surface, are mounted on the arms that can be moved to various radial distances from the center of the plates. So a ring on the surface, on one surface is called track, and each track will be divided into disc blocks. So these are called sectors, and formatting a disk divides the disk into tracks and disk blocks that can be addressed by the disk controller. So as you know, platter is a circular metal disk that is mounted inside a hard disk drive. The platter are mounted on the fixed spindle motor to create more data storage surfaces. So what are the attributes of a platter is that data will be stored in binary code, and it is a rigid round disk that is coated with the magnetically sensitive material, and data can be written to and read from both surfaces of the platter. And each platter will be broken into thousands of tightly packed concentric circles which are called tracks, and all the information stored on the hard disk is recorded in the tracks. Starting from 0 at the outer side of the platter, the number of tracks goes on increasing to the inner side, and each track again is further broken into smaller units called sectors. So disks contain concentric tracks, and tracks are divided into sectors. So sector is the smallest addressable unit in the disk, and each sector will hold 512 bytes of data, and few additional bytes are required for error detection and correction. And there is also read write heads. So these heads are an interface between the magnetic media and where the data will be stored and electronic components in the hard disk. This head converts the information which is in the form of bits to magnetic pulses when it is to be stored on the platter. So each platter has got two read or write heads, one mounted on the top and other one at the bottom. The heads are mounted on head sliders which are suspended at the ends of the head arms. So this is the entire diagram of movement of head disk mechanism, and you have got cylinders also. These are set of tracks at a given radius, and cylinder is a set of tracks which can be accessed without moving the disk arm. So the arm assembly is moved in or out to the position head on the desired disk track, and tracks under the heads make a cylinder. Only one head reads or writes at any one time. So these disks can be removable. So disks can be removable. That is one more point that we can consider under the storage device. And the disk drive attached to can be attached to computer via I/O bus, and these bus vary including EIDA, ATA, SATA, and USB fiber channel, SCSI, SCSI, and this host control. There is a host controller in the computer which uses the bus to talk to the disk controller which is built into the drive. So these are nothing but the explanation of mass storage structure. So next is about the magnetic tape. This was the early secondary storage medium, and but the access time is much lower than that of a disk, and tapes are currently used mainly for backup or for storing infrequently used information. They relatively hold permanent and large quantities of data. So these are the characteristics of magnetic tape, and the access time is slower than we can see that for this. And the random access time is about approximately 1,000 times slower than this. And it is mainly used for backup or infrequently used data. And it is kept in a spool and wound or rewound past read write head. So once the data is under the head, then the transfer rates are comparable to that of a disk. So the typical storage is about 20 to 200 GB. So many magnetic disk drives, they are addressed as large one-dimensional arrays of logical blocks. So these logical blocks are referred to as the smallest unit, and the smallest addressable unit on the disk storage is a block. So we have got certain size of the logical block, how many bytes. These are usually 512 bytes in size, and it is also the block size may change based on the formatting. So modern magnetic disk drives are addressed as large one-dimensional arrays of logical blocks. And one-dimensional array of logical blocks is mapped into sectors of the disk sequential. Like sector 0 is the first sector of the first track on the outermost cylinder, and this goes on. So the this mapping support for the conversion of logical block number into a old style disk address. So that type of address consists of cylinder number and track number within that cylinder and sector number within that track. That kind of hierarchy or the mapping goes on. So you have got rotational speed, and which is measured by constant angular velocity and constant linear velocity. So the rotational speed of a disk is measured by constant angular velocity and constant linear velocity, wherein constant angular velocity refers to the rotation speed of the disk, and this rotation speed of the disk is constant. And to use the plater in an efficient way, the outer tracks have more sectors in the inner tracks, and this is basically used in a hard disk. Next, about constant linear velocity, this says about the density of the bits per track. Okay, the density of the bits per track is uniform. So in order to get constant data rate, the rotation speed will be increased as the head moves from the outer track to the inner track. So this is used in our CDs and DVDs. So next is about the disk attachment. So as you know, the first here we'll talk about the host attached storage. So this is accessed using local IO ports, and these ports are available in certain technology. We have seen these ports, that is in ATA or SCSI or fiber channel. And the typical desktop PC will use a IO bus architecture like IDE or ATA, and this architecture supports a maximum of 2 drives per IO bus. In case of SCSI, which is the second architecture, it's a bus architecture. The physical medium is usually a ribbon cable. So this SCSI protocol, it supports a maximum of 16 devices on the bus. Next we have got a fiber channel cable. Fiber channel, it is a high speed serial architecture, and this architecture can operate over optical fiber or over 4 conductor copper cable, and it can be switch fabric or arbitrary loop. Switch fabric with 24-bit address space in which many hosts can be attached to many storage units, or it can be arbitrated loop of 126 devices. So now to talk about network attached storage, which is a special purpose storage system that is accessed over the data network. So it is a special storage system which are accessed remotely over the data network. So clients they access the NAS or network access storage with the help of RPC interface like NFS for Unix or CIFS for Windows machines like that. So these RPCs are carried with the help of TCP or UDP or an IP network. So how do these clients access this? Basically they access the NAS via RPC interface such as NFS and for Unix and CIFS for Windows, which are the common protocols for access. And RPCs are carried with the help of TCP or UDP over the IP network. So there is a NAS unit, and this NAS unit is usually implemented as a RAID array. Where there is a particular software which implements the RPC interface. What are the benefits of NAS? This NAS system stores the data as files and supports both CIFS and NFS protocol. And these NAS appliances are connected to a Ethernet network. This NAS device may support one or more RAID levels to make sure that the individual disk failures do not result in data loss. So we'll be seeing about this. Let's start our two disk scheduling algorithms here. So we have seen the four parameters, T specific parameters for accessing the disk performance, how the disk performance is calculated. That is based on the seek time and rotational delay and access time, where access time is the seek time plus rotational latency, and seek time is the time taken to position the head at the track. And rotational delay refers to time it takes for the beginning of the sector to reach the particular head. Okay, that is your rotational delay. Moreover, we can calculate the transfer time and disk capacity for this kind of disk access. So these are the disk scheduling algorithm which can reduce the total seek time of any request. So this scheduling it works on the seek time, and this there will be IO request which issues a system call to the operating system, and if the desired disk drive or the controller is idle, then the request will be served immediately. So when the one request is completed, the operating system will have to choose the pending request to service the next. So as you know, processor is much faster than the disk. So it's likely that there will be a multiple outstanding disk request before the disk is ready to handle. So disk scheduling it increases the disk bandwidth. So we have got these scheduling algorithm which will be listed next. One is FIFO, that is first in first out, SSTF, scan, cscan, look and clook. So we have got these request queue. Let's say that these are the request queue. Okay, these are the request queue may be from 0 to 199 cylinders. And let's say there is a request from 98, 183, 37, 122, 14, 124. So these are all the possible requests, let's say. And our head pointer is located at this location at 53. So how do you basically serve, or how do you serve the disk scheduling? Which are the disk scheduling algorithms that you can see? So let's start with the first one, that is nothing but this FIFO, or first in first out, or what we can say it as a FCFS, first come first served algorithm. So request will specify some pieces of information, that is whether the operation is input or output, and what the disk address for the transfer is, and what will be the memory address for the transfer, and what is the number of bytes to be transferred. So this is specified by the request. So in case the device or the desired disk drive and the controller they are available, the request can be served immediately. In case if it is busy, they will be placed in the queue of pending requests for that drive. The first scheduling algorithm is the first come first served algorithm. So in this algorithm, this is basically fair algorithm, and it generally does not provide the fastest service. For example, these are the request, and the disk queue has to serve these requests for IO to blocks on the cylinders in this particular order. And the disk head is initially at cylinder 53. So it will move the first it will start moving from 53 to 98, and then to 183, then 37, and again 122, then it moves to 14, and then 124, 65. So in that order, how the requests are being given, in the same order it is going to proceed. And there will be total head movement of if you try to count the head movements, it will be, how do you calculate is, you first subtract 53 minus 98, or 98 minus 53, then again 183 minus 98. For all the moves you just calculate the difference, and then you get the head total number of head movements, and you calculate 98 minus 53 plus 180 minus 98 plus 37 minus 183, that is 183 minus 37, like that. For each of the moves calculate the difference, you get around 640 cylinders. So next is about SSTF, or the shortest seek time first algorithm. So as you know, in FCFS, it has got the advantage that it is very simple and easy to implement, but it does not provide fast service, and it does not maximize the throughput. That is the drawback of the previous FCFS algorithm. So in this shortest seek time first, so this selects the next request at the one requiring the minimum seek time from the current position. So it is a form of SJF scheduling, and it may cause starvation. So here in all the requests nearer to the current head positions are serviced together before moving the head to some distant tracks. So this algorithm basically selects the request with the minimum seek time from the current head position. So since the seek time increases with the number of cylinders, so it chooses the pending request closest to the current head. So let's see some of the picture. So here there is a explanation of the same, wherein the requests are given. We have got certain requests. So the closest, the head starts at cylinder 53 itself, and so once we are at 53, it checks the closest request closer to 53. So what is the closer request closer to 53? We have got 65, is it? So it moves from 53 to 65. Next to 65, which is the closest request. We have got 67 in the request queue. So it moves from 65 to 67, and then again it goes on checking from 67, which is the next closest. From 67 again we have got 37 as the closer request, because 67 minus 37 seek time is less when compared to 65, or sorry, 67 minus 98, right? So 65 minus 37 seek time is less, so it start moving with the shortest seek time in that direction only. So it moves from 67 to 37, and again from 37 it checks to see the closest request, and so on. So totally the scheduling method results in a head movement of just 236 cylinders. So what is the advantage of such kind of scheduling algorithm is that throughput is however better than FCFS, and this kind of SSTF minimize the response time and there will be less number of head movements. But the drawback is starvation. Next is regarding the scan algorithm. So in this scan algorithm, it's also called as elevator algorithm, and here the disk arm starts at one end of the disk and moves towards the other end, servicing the request as it reaches each cylinder and until it gets to the other end of the disk. So at the other end, the direction of the head movement will be reversed, and head continuously scans back and forth across the disk. So in this case, if we start seeing the total number of head movements, let's look into the picture. So scan services the tracks in only one direction, that is either increasing or decreasing track number. So when scan reaches the edge of the disk like track 0, it reverses the direction. And if any request comes on its way, it will be serviced immediately, while the request arriving just behind the head will have to wait. So it's like an elevator. So you can see the current head position, it's at 53. Okay, so you can see the requests. So it starts moving from the current head position from 53 itself. The disk arm is moving towards 0. So the head will be serviced. Head will service first which one? 37. Next is service 14, and so on. It moves to 0, and then it will change direction. It goes to the next request that has to be served, like 65, then 67, then 98, then 122, 124, and 183. So if you just calculate the total number of head movements, so what will be the total number of head movements? You will get it. This will be somewhat an efficient one. Okay, you can just calculate the number of movements of this particular algorithm, like 53 minus 37, 37 minus 14, 14 minus 0 again, and then 65, then 65 minus 67, or 67 minus 65, like that. Calculate the subsequent differences to get the total number of head movements. And the basic advantage of scan algorithm is that it eliminates starvation, as we've seen starvation in SSTF algorithm, that is eliminated here. So throughput is somewhat similar to SSTF, but the disadvantage is that it increases the overhead and it needs a directional bit to change the direction. So next is about C-scan, or it's also called as a circular scan, and it's a variant of scan designed to provide more uniform wait time. So like scan, this C-scan moves the head from one end of the disk to the other, servicing the request along the way. When the head reaches the other end, it immediately returns to the beginning of the disk. It takes a circle and then starts servicing the request. So, uh, it treats the cylinders as the circular list that wraps around the last cylinder to the first one. So, it's what it does, it scans in cycles, always increasing or decreasing order. In that fashion it works. So let's see this example. So we have got a sequence of request queues, and the head starts at cylinder 53. So now from 53 it goes on to 65, 67, okay, and continuing the request in a particular order, 122, 124, and then to 183, and hits the head. It hits the head. Then what it does is it takes a U-turn, or takes a full circular turn, and then starts to service the remaining request. So we can calculate the seek length, or total number of head movements for this kind of algorithm. The next kind of algorithm is uh, look algorithm. Okay, so here this is a version of scan and cscan. This is a version of scan and cscan. As we have seen, how does the disk arm moves. Okay, here arm only goes as far as the last request is made in each direction. So you start the head moving in one direction, okay, and satisfy the request for the closest track in that direction, and then reverse the direction immediately without first going all the way to the end of the disk. So it goes up till the last request in each direction and then reverses the direction immediately without going to the end of the disk. As in cscan, it was going to the end of the disk. Okay, it was going to the end of the disk. But here it does not do in that manner. It just goes on servicing the request up till the last request, and then it goes to the servicing the next request, which is in the reverse direction. So this looks for a request before continuing to move in the given direction. So here you can see the sequence of request queues, and there are request queues in these points. So from 53 starts from 65, 67, the end request, it moves up till the end request, that is 183. From there it does not touch the end of the disk but starts passing for the next request, just goes on looking for the next request that has to be served. So comes back, reverses direction, goes to the next request 14 that has to be served, and then continues the same. So how do we select the best kind of disk scheduling algorithm? So SSTF is one of the most common kind of scheduling algorithm, and because it increases the performance over FCFS, and scan and cscan has performed better for systems that place heavy load on the disk because they have faced some kind of starvation problem, and for many particular list of requests we can define an optimal order of retrieval, but the computation is needed to find how an optimal schedule over SSTF or SCAN. So with any scheduling algorithm, performance depends heavily on the number and types of the request. Say for example, we have got a queue and which is having just one outstanding request. So then all the scheduling algorithms are forced to behave the same because they have only one choice for where to move the disk head, right? So they will all be behaving like FCFS scheduling algorithm because there is just one outstanding request. So the request for the disk service will be greatly influenced by the file allocation method. You must remember this file allocation method. So any program reading data, a contiguously allocated file will generate several requests which are close together on the disk. So this will result in limited head movement. So this disk scheduling algorithm must be written as a separate module, allowing it to be replaced with another algorithm if necessary. So we can say that either assistive for look is a reasonable choice for default algorithm. We cannot judge anything because of the complexities. So this scheduling algorithm must be in such a way that it should be designed as a separate module, and it should be replaced with a different algorithm if necessary. So here in scheduling algorithm we consider only the seek distances. So in case of modern disk, the rotational latency can also be large as the average seek time, but it is very difficult for the operating system to schedule for the improved latency, right? So in practical, we can say that the operating system may have got several constraints in the in way in which the request have to be served. For example, you may take demand paging. Okay, this demand paging has got priority over the application input output, and obviously if there are more writes than reads, and if the cache is running out of free pages, it becomes a problem, right? So to accommodate all these requirements, the operating system must choose its own what to do for its own scheduling, and to spoon feed the request to the disk controller one by one for some types of IO. Next, about disk management. So here we are considering disk formatting and the idea about bad blocks, a boot block. So the operating system is responsible for several aspects of disk management, like booting from the disk or considering the bad blocks. So as we know, disk formatting means dividing a disk into sectors that the disk controller can read and write. So as you know, a new magnetic disk will be just a blank slate, and it has got platters of magnetic recording material. And before any disk can store the data, it must be divided into sectors that the disk controller can read and write. So this is called as a low level formatting. So you can say that low level formatting, what it does is it fills the disk with a special data structure for each sector. So this data structure for a sector, it consists of a head, a data area, and a trailer. So the head and the trailer will contain information used by the disk controller, like sector number or error correcting code. So in order to use a disk to hold the files, the operating system will need to record its own data structure to disk. So there will be partitioning and logical formatting. Logical formatting means how do you make a file system. So in this case of partitioning of the disk, the operating system can treat each partition as though it was a separate disk. For instance, one partition can hold one copy of the operating system's executable code, while another holds the user files. So after partitioning, the next step is logical formatting. These are the two steps must be done in order for this to hold the files. So in this step, first the operating system stores the initial file system. Okay, so it first stores the initial file systems. Next, it's first does the data structures, which includes maps of free and allocated space and an initial empty directory. There will be an empty directory and maps of free space and allocated space like FAT. So here again, this formatting may be of physical formatting, that is low level formatting, or logical formatting, which I have mentioned. So in physical formatting, disk is formatted to store data. For that, it has to make sectors wherein it can read and write, and this low level formatting will fill the disk with a special data structure. So data structure consists of three fields like header, data area, and trailer. So where header and trailer will contain information used by the disk controller, and sector number and error correcting codes contained in the header and trailer. So for writing data to the sector, ECC is updated. That is, error correcting codes are updated. And for reading data from the sector, ECC is recalculated. So it is done at a factory level. And in logical formatting, you do partitioning and logical formatting there. So after the disk is partitioned only, you perform logical formatting, and it stores the operating system will store the initial file system data structures onto the disk. So some operating systems will have a special program that is the ability to use a disk partition as a sequence of logical blocks. So this array sometimes is called as a raw disk. They will not be using any file system, but they will be using disk partition as a logical sequence of logical blocks. For example, some database systems, they prefer raw input output because it enables them to control the exact disk location. Next is about the boot block. So for a computer to start running, okay, so whenever the computer is powered up or rebooted, a program will be read in. So this is the initial program. It's called the bootstrap program, where it initializes all aspects of the system, like from registers and contents of main memory and all will be initialized. And this kind of bootstrap program will find the appropriate operating system kernel and load the kernel into the memory. So there are also methods such as sector spanning which are used to handle bad blocks. So once again, this is the third kind of criteria which are is considering under disk management. So that which is nothing but bad blocks. So before moving on to bad blocks, in a boot block, so most of the computers, the bootstrap program will be stored in read-only memory, and this location is convenient because ROM needs no initialization, and it is at a fixed location that the processor can start execution when powered up. So most of the systems, they store a tiny bootstrap loader program in the boot ROM, so whose job is to bring in a full bootstrap program from the disk. So this bootstrap program will be stored in a partition called boot block. So that is the boot block, and it is a fixed location in the disk. So this disk has got a boot partition once again, and is called as a boot disk or system disk. So coming to the bad block. So because the disk will have moving parts and some kind of small tolerances, they are prone to failure, and sometimes the failure is complete and the disk entirely needs to be replaced. So more frequently, one or more of the sectors become defective, and most of the disks even come from the factory with bad blocks. So the data that will be recited on the bad blocks are usually lost. So what does the controller do is it maintains the list of the bad blocks on the disk, and the list is initialized during the low level format at the factory level. So the controller can be told to replace each bad sector logically with one of the spare sectors. So there is another sector called as a spare sector. So if the blocks go bad during the normal operation, a special program must be run manually to search for those bad blocks and to lock them away. So this controller is in charge of replacing each bad block with one of the spare sectors, and this scheme is known as sector sparing or forwarding. So what given, let's take an example of typical bad sector transaction, which might be as follows. The operating system will start to read, let's say, logical block 87, and the controller calculates the ECC and finds that sector is bad. It reports to the operating system. So next time when the system is rebooted, the special command is run to tell the SCSI controller to replace this bad sector with a spare. And after that, when the system again requests the logical block 87, the request is translated into replacement sector's address by the controller. So here let's see how do we boot how does the booting takes from a disk in Windows 2000 system. See, in the Windows 2000 system, it places its boot code in the first sector on the hard disk, which is called as the master boot record. And next, it allows the hard disk to be divided into one or more partitions. So the one partition is called the boot partition, and it contains the OS device drivers. So once the system identifies the boot partition, it reads the data, or it reads the first sector from that partition, which is called the boot sector. And this is how it proceeds. First it checks, creates the MBR where it has got the boot code and a partition table, and selects from the partition table a particular boot partition, and from that partition there is a sector that will be loaded on, and data will be read in from that boot sector. Next, about the swap space management. So this is another low level task of operating system, and the virtual memory uses the disk space as an extension of main memory. Since, as we know, disk access is much slower than memory access, using swap space it decreases the system performance. So the main goal of for the design and implementation of swap space is to provide best throughput for virtual memory system. So here the swap space use depends upon the operating system. So it can be carved out of the normal file system, and moreover it can be in a separate disk partition. So what is this swap space management? In this way, considering the swap space use, wherein swap space cannot completely make up for the lack of physical RAM, and therefore swap is usually, or it is primarily, as a means to run a number of programs simultaneously that would not fit into physical RAM. So in 4.3 BST, it allocates swap space when the process starts, that is, it holds a text segment. And kernel uses the swap maps to track the swap space use. And similarly, we have got other systems like Solaris 2, which allocates swap space only when the page is forced out of the physical memory. So first is about the swap space use. So this swap space it varies from different operating systems. Like systems that implement swapping may use swap space to hold the entire process image. Maybe data or code segments can be stored. And paging systems may simply store pages that have been pushed out of the main memory. So the amount of swap space needed, it varies on the amount of physical memory, amount of virtual memory it is packing, and the way in which the virtual memory is used. So the swap space cannot completely make up for the lack of physical RAM, but the disk access is much slower than RAM access. Therefore, swap can be used as a means to run several programs simultaneously that could not fit into the RAM. So this idea of virtual memory and swap space allows large process to run even if the process is only partially resident. Next, about swap space location. So the location of the swap space is divided into normal file system and separate disk partition. So we can say that if it is a large file within a file system, then the normal file system operations are carried on out on files. And in case of separate disk partition, the operating system cannot keep any files or directory in this space. So the system will create separate swap space storage manager for allocating and deallocating the block from this space. We'll see the swapping on Linux systems. So here Linux allows one or more swaps areas to be established. And this swap area may be either a swap file or a regular file. So it consists of uh, some kind of page slots, and this page slots holds the swap pages. So the location of swap space can be either in a normal file system or in a separate disk partition. So if it is large within the file system, normal file system operations are carried out on files. So each swap area will have got a swap map and there is a counter set. So in this, if the counter is 0, the corresponding page slot is available, or else if the counter is greater than 0, the page slot is occupied by the swapped page, and the value of the counter indicates the number of mappings to the swapped page. So if say counter is 3, it refers to storing a region of memory, it is shared by 3 processes.